That vehicle is a commercial blight and a violation of Covenant 7B, subsection C. Her voice, sharp and thin like a shard of glass, cut through the quiet afternoon air. I looked up from the rose bush I was trimming, the one my late wife, Sarah, had planted years ago. Standing on the edge of my lawn, where the manicured grass met the gravel of my private driveway, was Brenda Miller. She was the self-appointed queen of our little suburban kingdom, the president of the Oak Creek Homeowners Association. She held a clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield, her posture ramrod straight, her face a mask of pinched disapproval. Everything about her screamed authority, or at least a desperate need for it. I straightened up, wiping a bead of sweat from my brow with the back of a leather glove. "Brenda," I said, my voice calm. "We've been over this. It's my work truck. I'm a civil engineer." "I am aware of your profession, Mr. Harrison," she clipped, refusing to use my first name. It was a classic power move. However, the bylaws are explicit. No commercial vehicles are to be parked in driveways overnight. It lowers property values. I glanced over at my truck. It was a heavy-duty Ford F-450, customized with toolboxes and a small crane for lifting survey equipment. It was clean, well-maintained, and parked on my property, a good 50 feet from the road the HOA actually controlled. It wasn't some rust bucket leaking oil. It was the tool of my trade, the very thing that allowed me to afford living in this supposedly peaceful neighborhood. My daughter, Lily, and I had moved here after Sarah passed, hoping for quiet. We'd bought the house at the end of the cul-de-sac, a property that bordered undeveloped county land. The key selling point was the long, private driveway that snaked up to our house, an easement that I owned outright. It wasn't a community road. It was mine. This was a fact I had explained to Brenda on 3 separate occasions. "It's not parked in a driveway in the conventional sense," I explained again, patiently. "This is a private access road, deeded with the property. It's not HOA common ground." She sniffed, a sound of pure disdain. "A semantic argument. It is visible from the community street, and it is an eyesore. It looks industrial." I took a slow breath. I was a patient man. As an engineer who dealt with zoning boards and contentious city council meetings, I had to be. But my patience was a finite resource, a concrete foundation with a specific load limit. Brenda was starting to cause hairline cracks. "It's a truck, Brenda. That's what trucks look like. You will receive a formal violation notice in the mail," she declared, making a sharp, decisive check mark on her clipboard. "You have 7 days to rectify the situation. After that, a fine of $50 per day will be levied." She turned on her heel, her sensible walking shoes crunching on the gravel she seemed to despise so much, and marched back toward the pristine sidewalk of the HOA-controlled world. I watched her go, a strange mix of annoyance and weary resignation settling over me. This was the 4th time in 2 months she had found something to complain about. The first was the height of my grass, which I'd measured and found to be a 1/4 inch under the maximum allowed height. The second was a supposedly unauthorized garden gnome, a gift from Lily, which I proved was in a location exempt from decoration bylaws. The third was the color of my mailbox flag, which she claimed was an unapproved shade of red. Each time, I had calmly and logically dismantled her complaint with a polite email referencing the specific bylaws she was misinterpreting. Each time, she had simply moved on to a new, more absurd accusation. The truck, however, felt different. It was personal. It was my livelihood. I sighed, turning back to Sarah's roses. Their thorns suddenly seemed less threatening than the woman in the visor and polo shirt disappearing down the street. I just wanted to be left alone, to raise my daughter and do my work in peace. But I had a sinking feeling, a cold dread that settled in my gut like wet cement. Brenda Miller wasn't going to let that happen. This wasn't about a truck. This was about control. And her house of cards was built on a foundation I knew, professionally, was dangerously unstable. The violation notice arrived 4 days later, as promised. It was printed on thick, cream-colored paper, embossed with the Oak Creek HOA logo. It felt ridiculously formal, like a declaration of war written on a wedding invitation. The letter cited the bylaws she'd mentioned and included a grainy, zoomed-in photo of my truck taken from the street. It looked vaguely menacing in the picture, like a lurking beast. I had to admit, her propaganda game was on point. Lily, who was 16 and had a finely tuned radar for injustice, was furious. "She can't do that, Dad. It's our driveway. You own it." "I know, honey," I said, putting the letter down on the kitchen counter. "It's not about being right. It's about her wanting to be in charge." "So what are you going to do?" she asked, her arms crossed. "You can't just let her walk all over you." My first instinct was to handle it the way I always had, with calm, irrefutable logic. I sat down at my computer and drafted another polite, professional email. I attached a copy of my property deed, a screenshot of the county plat map clearly outlining my private easement, and a highlighted section of the HOA's own governing documents that defined driveway as being on a member's platted lot, which my access road technically wasn't. I explained, for the fourth time, that the HOA had no jurisdiction over my private access road. I hit send and felt a small sense of satisfaction. Checkmate, I thought. The response came less than an hour later. "Mr. Harrison," it began, dripping with condescension. "Your interpretation of the governing documents is, unsurprisingly, incorrect. The Architectural Review Committee has final say on all aesthetic matters visible from common areas. Your industrial vehicle is a clear detriment to the community's visual harmony. The fine stands. Please remit payment to avoid further action." The Architectural Review Committee. I laughed out loud. The ARC consisted of Brenda, her sycophantic best friend Carol, and a retired dentist named Arthur who just voted with Brenda to avoid any conflict. It was a kangaroo court, and she was the head kangaroo. This was the moment the first hairline crack in my foundation of patience widened into a fissure. She wasn't just mistaken, she was willfully ignoring facts and inventing authority. She was a bully. I didn't reply to the email. Arguing with a zealot was like trying to pour concrete in a hurricane. Pointless and messy. Instead, I did what I do best. I started digging. My home office was a sanctuary of order. Blueprints, survey maps, and reference books lined the walls. It was here that I solved problems, not with arguments, but with data. And Brenda was now officially a problem. I spent that evening pulling every public document related to the Oak Creek HOA. The original articles of incorporation, the full set of covenants and restrictions, the meeting minutes from the last 5 years that were available on the county website. I spread them out on my large drafting table, cross-referencing, highlighting, making notes. It was like analyzing a complex site plan, looking for the weaknesses, the miscalculations, the structural flaws. And I found one. A big one. In the annual budget reports, under the maintenance section, was a recurring line item, easement road upkeep. It was a significant expense, listed at $10,000 a year. The budget specified this was for grading, gravel replacement, and snow removal for the access road leading to the lots at the end of the cul-de-sac. There was only one such road. Mine. The HOA was billing every single one of the 200 homeowners in our community for the upkeep of my private road. A road I maintained myself. A road their own president was simultaneously claiming was a source of community blight. The hypocrisy was stunning. It was a buzzing in the air like static electricity before a lightning strike. This wasn't just about a power trip anymore. This was fraud. I leaned back in my chair, the pieces clicking into place. Brenda wasn't just a tyrant. She was a thief. She was using my truck as a smokescreen, a way to harass the one person who might eventually uncover her little scam. By making me the villain, she deflected any potential scrutiny of the very land she was illegally billing the community for. My anger, which had been a low simmer, began to boil. This woman was using my property to steal from my neighbors and then using that same property as a weapon to attack me. The game had changed. This was no longer a defensive action. I wasn't just going to prove I was right. I was going to prove she was a criminal. My resolve hardened like quickset concrete. I was going to dismantle Brenda Miller's little empire, piece by piece. And I was going to use my professional skills, the very ones tied to the truck she hated so much, to do it. The first fine notice arrived a week later. $50. I filed it away in a new folder labeled Brenda. The next day, a second notice. $100 total. I filed that one too. She was digging her own grave, one ridiculous piece of paper at a time. And I was more than happy to hand her the shovel. The next phase of my plan required a different kind of data collection. Brenda's power came from her public persona, the image of a diligent, rule-following protector of property values. I needed to document the reality. I invested in a high-quality security camera system. I installed 4 small, discrete cameras around my property. One was focused directly on the entrance to my driveway where it met the HOA street. Another covered the length of the access road itself. A third pointed at my front door, and a fourth had a wide-angle view of the truck's parking spot. They were motion-activated and recorded high-definition video and audio directly to a secure cloud server. The installation was easy, running conduit and wiring was a simple task for an engineer. I felt a cold, satisfying calm as I calibrated the final camera. I was no longer just reacting. I was setting a trap. I was building a case. It didn't take long for the trap to get its first nibble. 3 days after the cameras went live, an email landed in my inbox. It was from Brenda, but this time it was CC'd to the entire HOA mailing list. The subject line was, Community Standards and Willful Violations. The email was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive prose. It spoke of certain residents who felt they were above the rules. It lamented the visual pollution caused by industrial equipment and how it threatened the serene, residential character of Oak Creek. She never used my name, but every single person in the neighborhood knew who she was talking about. It was a public shaming. A digital tar and feathering. My phone started buzzing with texts from a few of the more reasonable neighbors. Mark, a retired cop who lived 2 doors down, sent a simple message, "She's out of her mind. Don't let her get to you." I appreciated the support, but I wasn't angry. I was delighted. She was escalating, creating a public record of her harassment. She was turning a private dispute into a community spectacle, ensuring she would have a full audience for her eventual downfall. I saved a PDF of the email to my Brenda folder. Exhibit A. The next day, things escalated from digital to physical. I was at my desk reviewing a hydrology report when my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the driveway camera. I pulled up the live feed. A large tow truck was slowly backing up my private access road. My blood ran cold. This was a line I hadn't expected her to cross so quickly. Attempting to tow a vehicle from private property without the owner's consent was illegal. It was theft. I watched as the driver, a burly man in greasy overalls, got out and started assessing my F-450. A moment later, Brenda's golf cart zipped into view. She pulled up beside the tow truck, clipboard in hand, and began pointing and gesturing emphatically. The camera's microphone picked up snippets of their conversation. Violating covenant, multiple notices authorized by the board, she was saying, her voice filled with self-righteous authority. The tow truck driver seemed hesitant. "Private road, ma'am." "Are you sure?" "It is an HOA matter," she snapped. "I am the president. You are authorized to remove it. Now, get on with it." I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. "There's a vehicle theft in progress at my address," I said, my voice steady and clear. I gave the operator my address and a description of the tow truck and Brenda's golf cart. "They are trespassing on my private property, attempting to steal my vehicle." Then I walked outside. I didn't run. I didn't shout. I walked calmly down my driveway, my phone in my hand, its screen visibly recording. Brenda's head whipped around as I approached. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, quickly replaced by a triumphant smirk. "Well, Mr. Harrison. Finally decided to deal with your problem." "This is not your property, Brenda," I said, my voice even. I looked at the tow truck driver. "And you are trespassing. I suggest you get back in your truck and leave before the sheriff's deputies arrive." The driver's eyes went wide. "Sheriff? Ma'am, you didn't say anything about." "He's bluffing," Brenda shrieked, her composure cracking. "He's the one breaking the rules. I have the authority of the homeowners association. Now tow this monstrosity." "The HOA has no authority here," I stated flatly. "This is private land. What you are doing is a crime." As if on cue, the distant sound of a siren grew closer. Brenda's face went pale. The smirk vanished, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. The tow truck driver immediately dropped the chain he was holding and started backing away toward his cab. "You called the police?" Brenda whispered, as if I had just committed the ultimate social sin. "I reported a theft in progress," I corrected her. "Which is exactly what this is." Two sheriff's cruisers pulled up at the bottom of my driveway, their lights flashing. My neighbor, Mark, was standing on his lawn, watching the whole thing unfold. He gave me a subtle nod. Two deputies got out, their expressions all business. One, a tall man with a calm demeanor, walked toward us. "What seems to be the problem here?" Brenda immediately launched into a hysterical tirade. "Thank goodness you're here, officer. This man is in violation of our community bylaws, and he refuses to comply. I, as president of the HOA, authorized the removal of this illegal commercial vehicle." The deputy listened patiently, then turned to me. "Your side of the story, sir?" "Very simple, officer," I said, holding up my phone. "This is my private property, not HOA common ground. This woman hired this tow company to illegally enter my land and steal my truck. It's all on video, including her ordering him to do it after he expressed hesitation." I turned to the tow driver, who looked like he wanted the earth to swallow him whole. "I'm not pressing charges against you. You were misled. But I want you off my property now." He scrambled into his truck, started the engine, and navigated the large vehicle back down the driveway with surprising speed. The deputy looked from me to a sputtering Brenda. "Ma'am, is this your property?" It's a community issue," she stammered. "It affects all of us." "That's not what I asked," the deputy said, his voice hardening slightly. "Is this piece of land, right here where we are standing, owned by the HOA?" Brenda's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. "I have the property deeds and plat map right here, officer," I offered, gesturing toward my house. "I can show you exactly where HOA jurisdiction ends and my private property begins." The deputy sighed. He turned to Brenda. "Ma'am, you can't just have vehicles towed from private property. That's a civil matter at best, and potential grand theft auto at worst. This is a verbal warning. Do not attempt this again. If we get called back here for this, you will be cited for trespassing." Brenda's face was a mottled mess of red and white. She looked utterly humiliated. The queen had been publicly rebuked in front of her subjects. She shot me a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. It was a promise of future vengeance. "This isn't over," she hissed under her breath, so only I could hear. Then she stomped back to her golf cart and sped away. I thanked the deputies, who gave me a nod and left. Mark came over, a grin on his face. "That was beautiful, man. Absolutely beautiful." "It's just the beginning," I said, watching Brenda's cart disappear. She had tried to take my property. She had tried to humiliate me. She had involved law enforcement. She had declared war. And she had no idea how well armed I was. The failed towing attempt was a major turning point. Brenda had been publicly humiliated, and it made her reckless. Her campaign against me escalated from bureaucratic harassment to something far more vicious and personal. A few days later, a pristine white van from the County Child Protective Services pulled up to my house. My heart hammered against my ribs. Lily was at school, thank God. A kind-looking woman with a weary expression introduced herself. She had received an anonymous tip. The caller claimed I was an unstable, aggressive parent, creating an unsafe environment for my teenage daughter. The proof cited was my violent and threatening confrontation with a community volunteer, Brenda, and the presence of a large, dangerous industrial vehicle on the property. My blood boiled, but I kept my composure. I invited the social worker inside. I calmly explained the situation with the HOA president. I showed her the video of the towing incident, where I was clearly the calm one and Brenda was the one shrieking orders. I showed her the string of harassing emails. To her credit, the social worker saw it for what it was. "We have to follow up on every call," she explained apologetically. "But this has all the hallmarks of a false report used as a harassment tactic. I'm so sorry you have to deal with this." She left after a brief, polite tour of our clean and stable home. The case was closed before it was even truly opened. But the damage was done. Brenda had tried to use my daughter as a weapon against me. That night, I sat in my office, staring at the growing Brenda file. The line had been crossed. This was no longer about property or bylaws. This was about protecting my family. The cold satisfaction I had felt while setting up my cameras was gone, replaced by a glacial fury. The plan needed to accelerate. My next move was to formalize the status of my private road. I knew from my professional experience that certain private roads could be designated as official emergency access routes, especially in areas bordering undeveloped land where wildfires were a risk. I spent 2 days preparing a package. I drew up a new, professionally certified survey map of my property and the surrounding area. I wrote a detailed proposal, complete with traffic flow analysis and response time calculations. My proposal argued that my private access road was the only viable route for heavy emergency vehicles, like fire engines or ambulances, to reach the 3 county parcels directly behind my neighborhood. The main HOA streets were too narrow, with tight turns and decorative landscaping that would impede a large truck. My road was straight, wide, and clear. I formally submitted the package to the county planning department, the county fire marshal, and the sheriff's office. I wasn't asking for them to take ownership of the road, I was simply asking for it to be officially designated on county maps as the primary emergency access easement for that sector. This served 2 purposes. First, it would make any attempt to block the road, say, with a tow truck or a maliciously placed community garden, a serious public safety violation, moving it from a civil TIF to a criminal offense. Second, it would put Brenda on the radar of some very important people. While I waited for the county's response, Brenda launched her next attack. An official-looking letter arrived from the State Engineering Licensing Board. A complaint had been filed against me. The complaint, filed anonymously, of course, alleged that I was using my private residence as an unlicensed industrial yard. It claimed my work truck was leaking hazardous chemicals into the soil, a violation of environmental regulations and my professional code of ethics. It was a direct attack on my livelihood. A complaint like that, even a baseless one, could trigger an investigation that could suspend my license and destroy my reputation. I had to spend the next week meticulously documenting the maintenance records for my truck, providing chemical manifests for all materials stored on it, which consisted of survey paint and lubricating oil, all in sealed containers, and writing a lengthy, formal response to the board. I knew the complaint would eventually be dismissed. But it cost me time, money, and a significant amount of stress. She was trying to break me by 1,000 cuts. But every cut was just making me more determined. Then, the whistleblower appeared. It happened in the most unexpected way. I was at the local grocery store, picking up milk and bread, when a man approached me hesitantly. It was Arthur, the retired dentist from the Architectural Review Committee. He was a meek, quiet man who I'd always seen as one of Brenda's loyal lapdogs. "Mr. Harrison," he said, his voice barely a whisper. He kept glancing around as if expecting Brenda to pop out from behind a display of canned peas. "Arthur," I said, surprised. "Good to see you." I need to talk to you," he stammered. "Not here," he scribbled his address on a napkin. "Can you come by my house in an hour? Please. It's important." An hour later, I was sitting in Arthur's meticulously clean living room. He was a nervous wreck, wringing his hands. "I can't do it anymore," he blurted out. "What Brenda is doing. It's not right. The things she's saying about you in the board meetings, the lies. And the money." He trailed off. I waited patiently. "I was the HOA treasurer for 5 years before she took over," he explained. "I know the books. I know how things are supposed to work. She's been cooking them." My ears perked up. "What do you mean?" "That line item," he said, his eyes wide. "The easement road upkeep, it's a ghost. There's no contractor. The invoices are fake." He got up and retrieved a thin file folder from a desk. "She thinks she's so clever. The invoices are from a company called B.M. Landscaping, B.M. Brenda Miller. It's a shell company she set up. The address is a post office box in the next town over." He opened the folder. Inside were copies of bank statements and invoices. $10,000 a year, for the last 3 years, paid by the HOA to a company owned by its own president, for work that was never done, on land the HOA didn't even own. $30,000, I said, a low whistle escaping my lips. She's been embezzling. And that's not all, Arthur said, his courage growing. She gets kickbacks from the landscaping company that does the common areas. She approves unnecessary work at inflated prices, and they cut her a check. I have proof of that, too. He pushed the folder across the table toward me. I was too scared to say anything. She's a vindictive woman. She threatened to make my life miserable, tell people I had my dental license revoked for malpractice. It wasn't true, but people would believe it. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. The CPS call, he said, his face pale. When I heard she did that, to your daughter. That's a line you don't cross. My own grandkids visit me here. That could have been any of us. I looked down at the folder in my hands. This was it. This was the final piece of the puzzle. This was the kill shot. Arthur, I said, my voice thick with gratitude. You have no idea what you've just done. You're a good man. He looked relieved, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Just bring her down, he said. Please. I left Arthur's house with the folder tucked securely under my arm. It felt as heavy and as powerful as a block of C4 explosive. The next morning, I received an email from the county fire marshal's office. My proposal had been reviewed and approved. My private access road was now officially designated as Emergency Vehicle Easement 7. A formal notice would be sent to the Oak Creek HOA, and new signage would be installed at the base of the driveway within the week. Any obstruction of that easement was now a state-level offense. I sat back in my chair, the two pieces of my strategy locking together with a satisfying click. I had the proof of her financial crimes. And I had the legal framework to corner her. The time for quiet investigation was over. It was time to involve the higher authorities. I spent the afternoon compiling a comprehensive evidence package. It included a detailed narrative of the harassment campaign, copies of the fines and threatening emails, the high-definition video of the illegal towing attempt, the false CPS report, the malicious complaint to my licensing board, and the entire contents of Arthur's folder, neatly organized and cross-referenced. I didn't go to the local sheriff. This was bigger than a simple dispute now. This was felony embezzlement, mail fraud, and wire fraud. This was a job for the district attorney. I made an appointment and, 2 days later, sat across a desk from a sharp, no-nonsense assistant district attorney named Ms. Diaz. She listened intently as I laid out the entire story, from the first complaint about my truck to the financial documents from Arthur. I presented my evidence binder, which was now about 3 inches thick. She was silent for a long time after I finished, slowly flipping through the pages. She paused on the bank statements for B.M. Landscaping. Mr. Harrison, she said finally, looking up at me. You've done most of our work for us. This is one of the most well-documented cases of HOA fraud I've ever seen. She closed the binder. We're opening a formal investigation, effective immediately. We'll need to speak with Mr. Arthur, and we'll be subpoenaing the HOA's full financial records. Given the evidence you've provided, I expect we'll be able to secure a grand jury indictment. A wave of relief washed over me, so potent it almost made me dizzy. The weight I had been carrying for months was finally being transferred to the scales of justice. Just one thing, Ms. Diaz added, a slight smile on her face. Try to act normal. Don't let her know what's coming. We want to make sure she doesn't have time to destroy any evidence. Believe me, I said. I can do that. The annual HOA meeting was scheduled for the following month. It was typically a sleepy affair, with low attendance and boring discussions about mulch and poolside furniture. This year, I had a feeling it was going to be standing room only. In the weeks leading up to the meeting, I played the part of the beaten man. I stopped responding to Brenda's increasingly unhinged emails. I let the fines accumulate without protest. I kept to myself. From her perspective, it must have looked like I had finally given up, crushed by her relentless assault. This only made her more arrogant. 2 days before the meeting, a new sign was installed at the entrance to my driveway by the county. It was a large, official, red and white sign that read, Emergency Vehicle Access, Do Not Block, Tow-Away Zone, State Statute 1822041. Brenda must have seen it, because she sent out another mass email to the community that evening. "It has come to my attention," she wrote, "that a resident has colluded with the county to have a deceptive sign placed on community property in an attempt to intimidate your HOA board. Rest assured, this fraudulent sign holds no legal authority over our bylaws. The matter of the illegal commercial vehicle will be dealt with decisively." I laughed as I read it. She had just, in writing, declared her intent to ignore a state law and a public safety directive. I forwarded the email to Ada Diaz with a simple note: "More fuel for the fire." The night of the annual meeting arrived. The community clubhouse was packed. Word had spread that the ongoing feud between Brenda and me was going to come to a head. The air was thick with tension and anticipation. I saw Arthur sitting near the back. He looked nervous but resolute. Mark gave me a solid thumbs up as I took a seat. Lily was at home, but she'd wished me luck. "Go get her, Dad," she'd said. Brenda stood at the podium, basking in the attention. She opened the meeting with the usual procedural nonsense, her voice oozing confidence. Then she arrived at the main event. "And now," she announced, her eyes finding me in the crowd, "we must address the ongoing and serious violation by the resident at Lot 114, she looked down at her notes. "Mr. Harrison's refusal to remove his industrial truck has resulted in accumulated fines totaling $3,250. The board has voted to place a lien on his property." A gasp went through the room. A lien was a serious escalation. "Furthermore," she continued, her voice rising with theatrical indignation, "his attempts to subvert our authority by involving outside agencies and erecting fraudulent signage will not be tolerated. We are a community of laws, and no one is above them." She looked at me, a smug, triumphant smile on her face. "Mr. Harrison, do you have anything to say before the board finalizes this action?" This was my cue. I stood up and walked calmly to the front of the room. I wasn't carrying a binder or a folder. My hands were empty. "I do, Brenda," I said, my voice quiet but carrying through the silent room. "I have a few questions for you first, if you don't mind." She waved a dismissive hand. "The time for questions is over." "I think you'll want to answer these," I said. "For instance, can you please explain to the community the line item in our budget for easement road upkeep, which has cost us $30,000 over the last 3 years? A flicker of panic in her eyes. "That's for routine maintenance on shared access roads." "Really?" I asked, my voice still conversational. "Because the only road that fits that description is my private driveway, which you see here on the county plat map." I gestured to a large screen on the wall, where a projector I had set up earlier suddenly flickered to life, showing the map in stark detail. "A road the HOA has never touched. A road you've been trying to get me fined for." Murmurs started to ripple through the crowd. "And can you tell us about the contractor who received those payments?" "A company called B.M. Landscaping." Brenda's face was turning white. "This is out of order. This is slander." "Is it?" I continued, my voice growing harder. "Because B.M. Landscaping's business address is a P.O. Box, and its sole officer is listed as Brenda Miller. Would you care to explain why you, as HOA president, have been paying yourself $10,000 a year of our money for work that was never performed?" The murmurs grew into a loud buzz. People were turning to look at her, their faces a mixture of confusion and dawning anger. "These are baseless accusations," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "Lies from a disgruntled rule-breaker." "Then maybe you can explain this." The image on the screen changed. It was now a high-definition video. The video from my security camera. The room watched in stunned silence as the tow truck backed up my driveway. They saw Brenda arrive. They heard her, clear as a bell, order the driver to commit a crime. "I am the president. You are authorized to remove it," her voice echoed through the clubhouse. The crowd gasped. "Or maybe," I said, as the video ended, "you'd like to talk about the anonymous, false report made to Child Protective Services against me. Or the baseless complaint to my professional licensing board. Or this email." The screen changed again, now showing her latest email, the one where she called the county's official emergency access sign fraudulent and declared her intent to ignore state law. Brenda was backed against the podium, her face a mask of horror. Her empire was crumbling around her in real time. You can't prove any of this, she screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. Oh, I think we can, a new voice said from the back of the room. The doors opened. Ada Diaz walked in, flanked by 2 uniformed sheriff's deputies. The entire room fell silent. Brenda Miller, Diaz said, her voice ringing with authority. You are under arrest for multiple counts of felony embezzlement, wire fraud, and mail fraud. Brenda stared at them, her mouth agape. The color drained completely from her face. She looked like a ghost. The deputies moved forward, past the stunned homeowners. They reached the podium, took Brenda's arms, and placed them behind her back. The sharp click of handcuffs being fastened echoed in the dead silent room. That's when she finally broke. You, she shrieked, her head snapping toward me, her face contorted with pure, primal rage. You did this. You think you're so clever with your maps and your videos. You will regret this. I will destroy you. I will own you. It was a hollow, impotent threat from a queen who had just been dethroned. The deputy started leading her away, still screaming threats and curses. As she was being guided through the parted crowd of her former subjects, her eyes met mine one last time. They held no power anymore. Only a pathetic, desperate hatred. I just stood there, calm and silent, and watched her go. The room remained silent for a full minute after the doors closed behind her. Then, slowly, someone started to clap. Then another. Within seconds, the entire room had erupted in applause. Mark came up and slapped me on the back, a huge grin on his face. Arthur was crying, tears of sheer relief streaming down his face. One by one, my neighbors came up to me, shaking my hand, thanking me for standing up to the bully they had all been too afraid to confront. The community, once ruled by fear, was liberated. The aftermath was swift and decisive. With Brenda gone, the rest of her cronies on the board resigned in disgrace. An emergency election was held, and a new, sensible board was put in place, with my neighbor Mark as the new president. Their first order of business was to formally drop all fines against me and issue a public, community-wide apology. Their second was to hire a forensic accountant. The investigation revealed that Brenda's fraud was even more extensive than we knew. The kickbacks from the landscaping company, fake maintenance fees, skimming from the reserve fund. It all added up to over $150,000 stolen from the community over her 6-year reign. Brenda Miller's downfall was absolute. Faced with an ironclad case, she took a plea deal. She was sentenced to 5 years in state prison. She was forced to pay full restitution, which meant selling her house and liquidating every asset she had. She lost everything, her money, her home, her reputation, and her freedom. Her last, impotent threat to me echoed in my mind for a while, but it faded quickly, replaced by a profound sense of peace. The community began to heal. The oppressive atmosphere of constant scrutiny lifted. People started talking to each other again. The ridiculous, nitpicky rules Brenda had instituted were rolled back. Oak Creek started to feel like the peaceful sanctuary I had hoped it would be when I first moved in. My truck remained parked in its usual spot on my private road. It was no longer a symbol of conflict, but a quiet monument to the victory of reason over tyranny. It was a reminder that sometimes, the most effective weapon is simply knowing what you're talking about and having the patience to prove it. A few months later, I was out trimming Sarah's roses, just as I had been that first day Brenda confronted me. The sun was warm, the air was quiet, and the scent of the blossoms was sweet. Lily came out and sat on the porch steps, watching me. "It's so much quieter now," she said. "Yes, it is," I agreed, snipping a stray branch. I had never sought to be a hero. I was just a man who wanted to be left alone. I was an engineer, a problem solver. Brenda had presented me with a complex structural problem, a corrupt system built on a foundation of lies. So I had done what I do best. I assessed the weaknesses, gathered my data, and applied precise, overwhelming force to the critical failure points until the whole rotten structure came crashing down. It was, in its own way, a form of poetic justice. She had attacked my profession, and in the end, it was my profession that had utterly dismantled her. She had tried to take my home, and instead, she had lost her own. I finished with the roses and stood back to admire my work. The bushes were healthy, the lawn was neat, and my work truck sat quietly in its spot, ready for the next job. Everything was in its right place. The peace I had fought for had finally arrived. And it was every bit as good as I had imagined.